Rhoda, good morning to you.
Hi, good morning, Bishop. How are you doing?
I am doing good. I'm doing good. Got a heated morning going on inside of here.
I noticed that.
And we're not going to ease this down at all. There are a number of things as a political analyst and blogger that you have put up on your page that is well subscribed. And a lot of folks make comments on it. Is a good sounding board for feeling, because for some reason or the other they must have got the memo. Don't put nonsense on your blog, because they ain't putting nonsense up there. Rhoda Munilala. We're talking about some of the things that happened in the past week, and I'm going to start in the area of two things. One is the CARICOM question, and one is the fake news question. Let me go into fake news question first of all. Rhoda Munilala said that the information from the minister in the office of the Prime Minister, Stuart Young, text messages that Minister Young said supports the conclusion of bid rigging and cartel behavior among 5 contractors. Munilala is saying that's fake news. He said, just like the email gate, nothing will come of it and it will disappear. Rhoda Bharath, do you concur with the the former minister, or are you at variance?
I'm at variance with what the former minister has said because, well, as you well know, and lots of people on social media know, I got myself a copy of the lawsuit because of the civil suit, because once it's been lodged at the courts, it becomes a public document. Mm-hmm. So I made sure I got myself a copy of it. And in looking at it, what you realize is that the state would have gone through the headache of retrieving computers and phones that would have belonged to that would have been used by officials of the EMBD. Then CEO of the EMBD, Mr. Gary Palmer, his laptop and company-issued cell phone is what they would have forensically retrieved information from. Mm-hmm. And so I believe, based on the fact that it's coming from forensic retrieval of data, that it is on the basis of that the state is claiming that it is true.
There are a lot of folks who misunderstand this forensic thing. When they say forensic, it is not Rhoda going into your computer or Bishop going into your computer and just looking at what is there. Forensic means we're looking at what was already deleted.
What was there and what was deleted? And
even after you have emptied your trash bin, it is still there.
Well, maybe let me try and break it down a little bit further. We have remote servers. And with those remote servers, whether or not you delete something on the device,
that's right,
even if you go into the hard drive and delete things off the hard drive, you can still find evidence of it on remote servers. And it's the same thing that would have happened with the port fiasco.
By the way, do you feel safe? Okay. Stuart Young, the minister, said in his analysis of tenders submitted, actual work done versus what was claimed to have been done, an analysis of the contractor, and following the money, you see that there's information that supports a conclusion of bid rigging, cartel behavior among the 5 contractors, supported and or encouraged and or permitted by persons in public office, including the former Minister of Housing, Dr. Rhoda Munilala, who at all material times was the inline minister. From these decisions and the forensic work done on the computers we just talked about, you expect that this will lead to a possibility of a serious court matter that goes against those who are accused, or you think this will fizzle out?
Are you asking me if I think a criminal investigation is likely to happen? I think that a criminal investigation certainly ought to happen. There have been a number of people on the thread, and maybe I should point that out, that I have all of the SMS messages back and forth between former Minister Munilala, the contractors, and the CEO of the EMBD posted on my wall. So if people want to read the 10 or so pages of interactions between the 3 parties, they can read it there. Mm-hmm. Now, based on what you're seeing in the conversation between the 3 different groups of persons, the contractors, the CEO at EMBD, and the former minister, it certainly comes across as if there's been misconduct in public office, and perhaps, well, let me not say perhaps, it comes across as if fraud, right, has taken place. And so what needs to happen at this stage, apart from the civil suit that the state, that the Office of the Attorney General is spearheading, the police now ought to get involved and launch their own investigation into what transpired between those 3 parties, so that they can then take a case to the DPP so that he can decide what charges need to be laid. But there's a clear distinction between a civil case And a criminal case. A criminal case could lead to sentencing and people having to put on silver bracelets and stay at the lovely maximum security facility that we have. Whereas a civil case allows the state to go back and retrieve monies that they believe have been misspent. And when you go through the state's case, as I have in the last 2 or 3 days, what you're seeing is that monies have been paid for works that have not been done. Now think about this, because you just talked about the flooding, all right? And you just talked about areas that have been hard hit. I want people to understand that according to this case here, $1.3 billion in road works was paid for, and the road works was not done. And that is for about for about 5 contracts in the EMBD. Right?
Primarily, where it was the sugar estate.
Yes, primarily in the sugar estate area. So we are talking about just that specific area. If we were to do a forensic audit of everything that happened in EMBD, just EMBD, one state company for, I don't know, the last 5 to 7 years, what else are we going to find? And I mean, the state's case builds a very frightening picture of a minister, a line minister, CEO, and contractors only being interested in collecting checks and when can I get the contract for this and when can I get the check for it. You're not hearing any conversation at all about the completion of works, the quality of work, and whether or not works were done adequately or properly.
There were additionally some disturbing little tidbits inside of there, i.e. a minister asking that a check be brought to him so he can make it the delivery. This is really unusual.
Well, listen, I'm reading it and every 2 minutes I'm asking, but where is the board? Where is the EMBD board and all of this? Because notice I have not talked about the EMBD board, nor have I talked about the cabinet. Right? So you're not hearing about the EMBD board. You're not hearing about the cabinet. And when people understand how contracts and tendering and all of those processes are meant to work, there at no point in time should a government minister be in direct contact with the CEO of a company or with contractors from a company. And you have messages that are according to the state that are establishing a relationship, a direct relationship between the minister and the contractors and the CEO of the company. I'm not hearing anything about the EMBD board, nor am I hearing anything about cabinet giving approval for things.
Well, it's instructive to note that the minister in the office of the Prime Minister, Minister Young, said we are going to follow the money. It does raise a very big point because, I mean, I don't care which jurisdiction you're in, what allegiance you have, what alignment or partisan politics you follow. If you hear a case that a minister is asking for checks to be delivered to him so he can deliver it to contractors, me thinks something smells.
Well, the thing is,
at the very least,
it smells at that level. But I want to also add a couple other things here. There is no way that the minister would have been able to do the things that he's doing there if public servants were not part and parcel of the entire thing. So you have Mr. Parmesan, who is essentially an employee of the state, and you also had engineers at the EMBD certifying incomplete works. Now, up to the point that I have got to in this civil suit, I've not seen any of the engineers being named, but it is indicated that the engineers have signed off on works. If the works are not complete, why are you certifying jobs as complete?
We are going to be dealing clearly with the initial salvo, which is this civil suit that was filed. And interestingly, so folks understand the context under which things are done and understand what sometimes get to be a merry-go-round. The state on the Thursday, I think it was last Thursday, filed a civil suit. On the Friday, we had the former minister speaking of information to buck the office of attorney and ex-Senator Gerald Ramdeen. Many say that this was supposed to throw it a different direction, make things muddy the water, let folks be occupied with something else. Some say there is credence in the bugging attempt, while others say this is coming at a time when it can be used clearly as a distraction as to what was not generally discussed in the public by Friday, but was in fact launched the Thursday.
Well, okay, I don't think that any of the parties that are involved in this lawsuit are unaware that the state has a case going on. What I will say though is this, because I'm not going to rubbish any of the claims that Mr. Munilal has made in Parliament. What I will say is, if Mr. Munilal has evidence and information, he ought to do just as I did. put together a case and hand it on to the police and let them do their jobs.
11:30 on time. Rhoda Bharath, political analyst and blogger, is my guest. I'm going to repeat this because you're going to hear this a lot of time. We heard it before. Follow the money. In this case, we're talking about $200 million fraud claim. But as Afra Raymond warned the last time he was here with us, there is also the HGC purchase of land at Eden Garden and Calcutta settlement. And you were looking at, if you're following the money, the same names seem to keep coming up.
Yes, the same names seem to be coming up, especially when it's contractors. And I believe that is why Minister Young made the comment about contractor cartel. So I'm glad that Afra made the point about Eden Gardens, because Eden Gardens is also for a significant sum of money, about $200 million as well. Then you have this particular claim that is several $100 million. And my understanding is that in 2015, July-August 2015, at least $1 billion in that 2-month period was borrowed from banks here and then used to pay contractors. The ostensible reason given for taking the loans out was to cover expenses, prior expenses. But then what was done was they used the money to pay contractors upfront for works that had not been completed. So I think it begs we need to ask the former Minister of Finance, then Minister Larry Hawaii, why exactly did he guarantee those loans, and then why did he allow those monies to be dispersed to paying contractors? To get back to the issue of following the money, I think we have now at least 2 major civil suits taking place in the country that we are aware of for the year. We have the issue of Eden Gardens. We now have this EMBD civil suit. Oh, I think a third one. I don't want to forget that the state is also attempting to retrieve the $34 million that would have been paid on the E-beam contract, that contract under life sport, where nothing was ever done, but the person received $34 million, Adolphus Daniel, I believe. So there are those civil suits, and I think it is commendable that the state is making an effort, 1, to tackle white-collar crime, and 2, to retrieve monies that we would have lost to poor tendering, procurement, and contract situations.
It is amazing because it can get a little confusing, and I don't know if you're in a position to respond to this, but I will say it does muddy the water a bit when you read that even though these contractors named in the civil suit, let's be clear, named in the civil suit, that 2 of these companies have been awarded contracts additional from the government. That is a little confusing.
Well, let me share my opinions on it. 1, I think that at this stage, certainly by now, if you've had these many issues being raised about, and I would imagine Calco is one of the companies you're talking about there. Right. If you have these many questions being raised about Calco, that in future, when people are putting together the terms for a tender, and when they are accepting, tenders and bids to come in, there has to be some sort of criteria that states if there are question marks over the person, that they have to kind of hold their hands a bit.
Some will argue, of course, innocent until proven guilty.
Right, exactly. So that's why I'm gonna get to this point. Right now, as our laws and everything stand, it is innocent until proven guilty. And if you decide to debar persons from taking part in an open tender, they could easily take the state to court and say that there is discrimination. Right, but I think that the state ought to take a pause and think, okay, this contractor's name keeps coming up in a number of issues, especially if it's for the same the same scope of works. If it's the same scope of works, and you know that you have prior problems with the contractor not fulfilling his duty on previous scope of works, then you need to hold your hand, I think. The optics on it alone, Bishop, will make the population look at the government askance.
There is unison in your view. I just wanted to put it out there because folks who are reading, including this morning's papers, are going to see that another company involved in the civil claim was awarded, and folks can wonder, well, where is the craziness? It is not craziness, it just happens to be low, and there is a thing called process.
Well, Minister Young did address that because it was raised in the press conference that he held on Monday of this week, where he said that his civil suit was being put together separate and distinct from contracts being put out. So, of course, now that the civil suit is there in court and taking place, other arms of the state are going to have to take a look at the contracts that they've been issuing.
Rhoda Bharath is my guest. We're going to do this all the way up until 12 o'clock. Just to remind you, next week, Saturday, the 28th, there will be a huge festival at the Queen's Park, Savannah. It is called Caribbean Strong. All the entertainers will be there. We are urging our listeners to go to our Facebook page and see where you can sign up. But importantly, to take the notice from 12 to 12 next week, Saturday, the 28th. And like I said, every entertainer, just about everybody is going to be there. We hope that you are there. Dry goods are asked to be dropped off here at 153 Track Reed Road. On the day of the event, you can bring your dry goods to the Queen's Park, Savannah. All right, take note of that. Just wanted to mention that. 11:36 on time. Rhoda, let's just turn the corner. We've got a number of corners here, and particularly we have things popping up all the time, so they're almost like the water puddles. Occasionally we'll take a little swerve here and there. I want to swerve into the area. The protests outside of the Parliament by workers of the gaming industry was a good opportunity for any politician to talk to the workers. That is fine. That is to be expected in politics. What was surprising about this, however, is that the opposition leader said to the protesters, suggested that may take one of you to represent your interests in the Senate, because she thinks that there is ignorance or not sufficient information as far as the gaming industry is concerned. The question is, are you currying favor here or cheapening the importance of senatorial appointments by doing this?
Well, then, if you're going to ask that question about the gaming industry, we can go all the way back to the issue of child marriage, where the opposition leader would have asked two of her senators, her opposition senators, to step aside to allow for one Hindu cleric and one Muslim cleric to come and argue in favor of not removing the restrictions on children being married. And I think certainly then I had grave misgivings and concerns about the way in which temporary opposition senators were signed in, and then the angle that the debate took. But I will take into consideration that ours is a democracy and we have to allow different people to have different voices. But one would have thought that would have happened with the independent bench and not the opposition bench. I think that perhaps one of the things that we need to look at is how interest groups here can reach out to senators and perhaps lobby senators to discuss various angles. But I don't think that we ought to be making the position of a senator come across as something that is trivial, to the point of prostitution, in a sense that anybody who wants to show up and have a say in Parliament can just decide that they can, jump onto any particular side. Especially because I think that we need to ensure that people are meeting criteria and people are meeting standards. That being said, I do believe that the gaming industry ought to have interactions with the state on this matter, because the legislation is going to have an impact on them. And I think as much opportunity should be given to them to air their concerns as much as possible. But I also think that they need to listen to some of what the state is saying. The state has pointed out that this legislation is not meant to be taxing employees, rather it is taxing the businessmen. And I find it nothing short of interesting that it's only the employees, and a particular type of employee at that. You are seeing young, black, single mothers that are being sent out there to function as the face of these enterprises. And when you take a look at two of the leading casino enterprises in the country, that would be the Princess Caribbean as well as Macau. One owner is Turkish, one owner is British. And I'm thinking to myself, why are we not seeing this British owner and this Turkish owner in the front lines alongside the employees, articulating their position properly, explaining to us just how much revenue they are earning when the month comes or when the year comes, and where that revenue is going to.
Though chagrined, you still see the right of the opposition leader to appoint these temporary senators as she sees fit. And your question is, where are the people who make the major money in this in this country. Why are they not present? These children and this particular group of workers you talked about, the folks who went and made their presence felt at the home of the finance minister. Do you think it was spontaneous? Rhetorically, I ask.
No,
really.
I don't think it was spontaneous because, I mean, listen, I think of myself as somebody who's very knowledgeable,
Yes.
and even I don't know where the Minister of Finance's house is. So I was surprised, one, that they were able, that all of these women were able to get themselves up to Maraval that on that rainy afternoon.
Up that hill.
Up
yes.
that hill to be able to protest. And now, for me, this raises a couple concerns, right? I think that people have a right to protest. I'm not saying that you don't have a right to protest, but I think when it's matters like these, you have the ministry. You can go to the ministry and lodge your protest in front of the ministry. You can go down to the waterfront and lodge your protest down at the waterfront. But I don't think that you should be getting to people's private homes.
You can go to constituency office.
Yes,
and do
you
what
can go
have
to the
do, yes.
constituency office. You can. There are lots of public spaces that you can go to.
Because
and
now you're lifting the security question. And that goes to another level. Speaking to the attorney friend of mine, made it very clear that this is one of those nuisance things that you don't charge people. You did do as the police did, which is to ask them to go away. However, it is almost like when they started burning tires in the streets, which I'm totally against, and you left it alone, and then everybody become a tire burner on the streets, and you have one person going to a minister's home doing this. It is a bad precedent that others will think this is the way to go.
Yep, pretty much. And so what you've done is you've kind of opened up a door there for people to think that it's all right to go to private properties and lodge protests.
This level of irresponsibility I raise because it is precipitous. I mean, you are looking at a very, very bad precedent to go that way, and many people will find themselves regretting this, even though they would want to say they have a right to protest.
The thing is, you have a right to protest, but there are parameters. Even people who want to do protests in the streets, they have to seek
Permits,
permission.
yes.
Yeah, you have to get
Stay
permits
within
and
a
permission.
confined area, yes.
Yep.
All right, 42 minutes after 11 o'clock. We're going to take this all the way up to 12 o'clock. Trust me, when we both sit down, we can do this for the rest of the afternoon. But let's go to the Cabo Star. Cabo Star broke down this week, and this is even while Bridgman VP is asking the port to reconsider the cancelled Ocean Flower among those tenders that were put in. Is this the start of a rocky relationship with a 20-year-old vessel, the Cabo Star? Are we to expect that this is the beginning of the roll?
No, I think if anything, we're going to get to the end of this. Now, the other report that I got hold of recently is the Mute report, but I haven't gotten to the point where I've read all of it. What I will say is this. Based on the comments that I would have heard from both the minister and the prime minister at the Joint Select Committee hearing on this whole ferry fiasco, I believe that as soon as this contract that was signed off on by port officials, as soon as this contract has been sorted out, I think we're going to see the back of the Cabo Star and the Ocean Flower, and they're going to move on to a fresh contract with a different vessel that is not bogged down and or encumbered by the problems that this entire project has been encumbered with. Now, it begs the question whether people followed that Joint Select Committee and understood, again, the role and the relationship between port management, the port board, and the cabinet, and the way in which the port board is saying that it received flawed information from port management and then gave wrong advice or bad advice to the cabinet.
That to me is the salient part that came out of that. That in addition to the attorney, but we leave that for a minute. But that to me was the important part.
Yes.
The important part is not a case of what everybody's doing, which is saying the board did this and the port did that and the port did that and the minister carried this or didn't carry that. The bottom line is you cannot be everywhere. And if the management of the port take information and pass to the board trusted the information is good information and they act on that.
Let's use you as a for example. Let's use this radio station as a for example, right? You can invite me to be here as a guest. But when I get here, there's a security downstairs, and then there is your production assistant. Those are two channels of quality control, as it were. If the security downstairs does not do what he or she ought to do, and then thereafter, if your production assistant does not do what he or she ought to do, you can only function efficiently on the strength of their efficiency. So the cabinet, if the cabinet did not receive good advice from the board, and the board received flawed and faulty information from port management, cabinet will proceed to make a bad decision.
Yes.
And you have a JSC, you have hours and hours and hours of testimony to establish that. And now we have 80-something pages of a report from Christian Mute with a lot of supporting documents, tons of supporting documents that will further establish the timeline. My concern here, and I guess the state is beginning to do something about it, because we have seen that they have retrieved information and documents on at least 2 port employees, and they have sent them home. They have been summarily dismissed. My concern here is that the state needs to ensure that it cleans up the problems within port management, so that the board is no longer in a position where it is receiving bad advice and then giving bad advice to the cabinet.
There are a lot of things that keeps coming out. A lot of things keep coming out from the GSC, and it extends itself way beyond just the management of the port. Everybody down at the port seem to have a food to eat.
Yes.
So
you have so many agents.
Yes.
And listen, there is very little difference between this port fiasco, the EMBD fiasco, and even my issue with the president. You have too many instances where public servants who for some reason or the other feel they ought to be helping appointed and elected officials and agents who want to have contracts. They seem to want to help these people and scratch their backs. And now you have to ask yourself, what are these public servants getting? Because you can remove an appointed or elected official. You can remove a board. But if you have the same public servants there who are quite willing to facilitate corruption over and over again, and then all that is going to happen is that you have a new set of persons with a change in board or a change in government or whatever, susceptible to becoming involved in corruption.
And that is one of the serious problems, because it also extends even across the labor.
Yes.
It just went across the board, and in every area we'll find out more about that. There is an aspect of this that I'm wondering. Well, 2 parts. Let me do the first part, because you just mentioned that very soon we'll see the back of the Cabo Star.
I think so.
Do you think we'll see the back of some people in handcuffs at the end of this?
You mean with the port issue?
With the port issue, yes.
I think we ought to. I think we ought to. I mean, there is evidence to show that people who should not have had direct contact with agents, people who wanted to do work with the port, had direct contact with agents. One of the aspects of this entire thing that interests me is the issue with Ms. Nairi Alfonso, who functioned as agent, as provider, as member of the board. I said to myself, but Nairi is all things to all people.
I was wondering if I could represent you, because I mean, I can suggest to you that this lady represents me. And after you're finished with it, by the way, it's mine. Anyway, it's 12 minutes before the top of the hour. One final question on this Bridgman deal. I get the feeling, with the VP of Bridgman being here for the extended period he has been, and he has volunteered to speak as much as anything they want to do. However, still having the Ocean Flower present in Trinidad and being part of that tender for the passenger boat, whether they get it or not, is there something I don't know that you have heard about as far as the indebtedness of the port contractually to the Ocean Flower, where he still feels it's going to cost you more money to complete that cancellation, and that may give you a reason to rethink my Ocean Flower. So I'll just put it there that you know. Is there something I'm missing?
You know what? I am not 100% certain. I'm glad that you raised it, because now I'm thinking that maybe there is some reason. Maybe there is more in the mortar than the pestle.
My mother always said, if they bring you more pepper than you want to eat, there must be something inside.
Yes, there must be something inside of it, because I'm thinking they continue to bring the ship down. They dry dock the ship here. Right. Okay. Well, I will make an effort to take a look into it and ask some pertinent questions.
Yeah, that would be interesting. Yeah. And then we can come back and we can sing the calypso Walla Walla Bing Bang. Let us continue. Pinal Debe. every point in Trinidad and Tobago, flooding is a major problem. We are seeing this morning that the deputy head of the Office of Disaster Preparation say, I am not going anywhere, albeit that there were some problems inside of there. We have looked at these problems and we will move to correct it. I want to deal with that situation, the role of the Office of Disaster Preparation and their being prepared, and equally, the whole question, or maybe I should say more importantly, the whole issue of illegal land clearing, the question of waterway redirection, the question of dumping, the question of many people, including big contractors, putting up structures that they are not cleared to do, putting it up on their own. They are illegal structures. What does it have to do with this? It has to do with them redirecting the waterway and or blocking it, impeding the flow. Then they are contributing to all of us paying a heavy price whenever we have these floods, because the nation has to pay for this one way or the other.
All right, let me try and break this down as best as I possibly can. And I am going to start not in Penal Debe, I am going to start in the Northern Range.
Hello.
Right. This morning when you talked about a whole bunch of communities that were affected, I think we also need to shout out the Arima Blanchishares community, because they are affected significantly by a number of landslides. And there's a reason I want to start there. With the Northern Range, when you have a lot of water coming down, you have water coming down from the mountainside and going into our water catchment areas. People know about the Oropouche Lagoon being down in south, but what lots of people aren't aware of is that the Oropouche water system, that whole waterway system, actually starts in the Northern Range, right? So you have lots of rain from an ITCZ system that hung over us for several days. And the water is flowing down from the mountain straight into the water courses all the way down to the lagoon. The nature of a lagoon, the way it is shaped as a basin, is that it will catch water, right? If you have a lagoon that is compromised, its drainage system, its drainage ways are compromised, then what you're going to have is water is going to sit in the lagoon system for far longer than it ought to sit in the system. If you also have high tides or spring tides in that time period, you're also going to have water sitting there for longer. If you have urban development, if you any sort of development taking place, especially if it is unsanctioned development that has not taken drainage into consideration, you're going to have the water sitting there for much longer. Exactly. Our problem in Trinidad and Tobago over the last 4 to 5 days is essentially that we have had water sitting down for far longer than it should be sitting down. So it didn't run off, it didn't flow off. There's nothing wrong with us having lots of rain. But there's a lot wrong with us not having adequate drainage. And you then have to pause and ask yourself, why do we not have adequate drainage? $5 billion, this is the information that has come to me. At least $5 billion was spent on a box drain system throughout the country, right? So you had a box drain system being built throughout the country to the tune of $5 billion, and that money clearly is not redounding to our benefit. You have a town and country planning unit, and I think we need to empower town and country planning to the point where when people are doing illegal construction, they can move in with armed people, whether it's police or army or a combination.
And not just stop it, but seize the property.
Put a stop to it, lock down the property so that nothing else can can happen on the property.
And take the property and give it as assets, give it as reimbursement to the state. Because So
you're talking about civil asset forfeiture?
Yes, because you've got to put something so prohibitive that folks don't think they can flirt with it. And if I am caught, I'm going to go to court, I'm going to get an injunction against you, I'm going to dance this out for a very long time. Hopefully, maybe next time get the election change and maybe I'll get my people in place. And or just absorb the cost of taking these chances.
Now, there are lots of things that we tend to forget. Recently, when after Brett, we found out that there were people who were actually stealing parts of the riverbank. They were essentially excavating the levees of the Caroni riverbank and using it to go and fill land and sell as soil all over the country. So you need to take into consideration that there is a lot of human activity. And it's not just human activity linked to the state, human everyday activity that leads to this level of flooding.
Mr. Finance Minister, they don't want to pay taxes. I tell you what, let's put some fines inside of there for a lot of this. We can help out with this deficit in a great way, but go ahead.
Right. Now let me bring it around to the Office of Disaster Management and Preparedness. My understanding is that the first responders to any sort of disaster in the country has got to be the municipal regional corporations, right? Yes. And they all have disaster management units. I can say with a great degree of confidence that there, certainly with the regional corporations that I am regularly in contact with, and I will admit that the ones that I am regularly in contact with are along the East-West corridor because that is where I live and work. When things began to happen, I was getting updates from them about what was taking place, that people needed to be careful. I kept focused on what was happening from Arima to Diego Martin because those are the areas that I frequent. I did not pay that much attention to other regional corporations in the country, but I am aware that councillors and chairmen and from the various borough corporations, they are the ones that have been on the ground. The ODPM's responsibility or role, as I understand it, is to organize and coordinate. All right. Now, if they are not, one of the roles in organizing and coordinating is ensuring that people have timely information, and they didn't do that. And I think they need to accept that they didn't do that and offer not a tepid response or a tepid mea culpa to the country. You have to be far more contrite. And you also have to indicate what steps you're going to put in place to ensure that it doesn't happen again. And unfortunately, this is not the first time for the year where the ODPM fell down by way of communication. And what you've seen is that social media, people have come together on social media, right, to fulfill that particular role of keeping each other informed about what is taking place. And the regional corporations have used social media to do that. So then it begs the question, is it that the ODPM does not have social media accounts? Is it that they don't know how to set up social media accounts? Is it that they're not in a position to have text messages be sent out to people's cell phones and mobile devices, or to have updates be sent as ticker information on television stations? No, I can't absolve them of their responsibility when it comes to communication. I can't speak to whether or not they were good at coordinating disaster relief because I'm not inside their offices. But as a person who is living in the country and who was paying attention to news and trying to keep abreast of what was taking place, they fell down, and they fell down badly.
You're going to find me in concert with you on that. However, while I understand that we must hold the Office of Disaster Preparation responsible for lack of coordination and or early warnings, there is something to be asked and something to be answered of what's the sense of putting out, albeit some folks said the riverine warning came 3 days inside of the rain period. And my question still remains, what's the point of issuing these things if there's no place you can really go? No, instead of, let's find the problem, what creates the problem in the first place. And until we start criminally holding people responsible for obstructing water courses and exacerbating questionable runoff and stuff like that by what they do, nothing will change.
We need to ask the Penal Debe Regional Corporation chairman what exactly has been going on in his municipality. And we need to get updates, we need to get reports to find out what exactly has been going on and whether or not waterways and watercourses were adequately maintained. Because I think that any area that sees it, that knows itself to be flood prone, there's a different degree of preparation that ought to be happening for the rainy season.
And vigilance to those who are, in fact, putting up structures, many of them illegally. And you don't want to be hard on squatters. You really don't want to do that. But you want to say, if you are contributing to the problem, I'm sorry, you must be mentioned in the sweep. And in the sweep, a lot of people in places they should not be, places not zoned for this, places questionable, low-lying areas where you're going to have this situation. So it's one thing for me to see these sad stories all the time. It's another side of me to go like, the same question I ask, how do we prevent this? And one of the preventative measures you use is to say, you're not supposed to be there. And we just have to be honest about that.
If you turn around and you point out to people you are living in an illegal development and your development is contributing to flooding, they're going to be very upset with you.
I know they would be. That's why I said at some point you have to get to saying, listen, a spade is what it is. Rhoda, Bharath, as always, folks can catch you on Facebook because they already know where you are, but they can go up and catch you there.
Yes, they can.
I thank you again for taking the time to be with us, political analyst and blogger. Thank you so much for coming in. One quick question. I've got 1 minte to do this, only because I leaned up hard against the clock. Is CARICOM really important?
CARICOM is one of the most
Are
important
you sure
things.
of that?
I'm absolutely
Because
certain about that.
opposition members asked for justification as to why we are.
The member for NAPRIMA. But you know what? Let me tell you something quickly in the last few seconds that I have here. The opposition in this country, from the DLP come right down, has had a long history of challenging and questioning our relationship in CARICOM.
It's not just CARICOM, it also went to other international organizations.
Well, it's weird that he would say that when he functioned as an ambassador at a point in time. But I will say this, Trinidad and Tobago can only thrive and strive if it has relationships with other countries and other economic blocs. So to raise a question like that in the parliament, to me, shows that there is a sort of beggared intelligence.
There is also another big question when you, in that area, when folks talk about lobbies, you're paying lobbyists. Yeah, you got to pay a lobbyist to watch your interest. Quite frankly, you're so small, nobody cares about your interest unless you've got some big company who is going to represent you. And there's a thing called cost of doing business.
Yeah.
You think that was lost?
Listen, I think some of those comments are mischievous comments.
Yeah, I know. And that's why I point them out. I don't think it's ignorance.
No, it's mischief.
No,
It's mischief. It's mischief.
Intellectually dishonest. That's all it is.
Very much
Opportunism. Rhoda, Bharath, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
You take yourself a very good Sunday.
Yes, and to you and to your listeners, because I'm not sure if I said good morning to people properly when I came on, so pardon my bad manners. And I want to also shout out the citizens, the residents of Arima Blanchishares, Mafeking, Mayaro, Guayari, who are also dealing up with a lot of flooding and landslide and heavy rain issues. My thoughts and prayers are with those communities as well.
You did not say good morning to the president.
Oh,
Joseph Rennie. Joseph Rennie, president of the Cooperative Credit Union. Thank you so much for coming in. Ian Hewitt, the president of the Maxi Taxis Association, along with Linus Phillips. Thank you both for coming in. Linus being the vice president. Errol Pilgrim, journalist. Thank you for joining us. And I'm sorry, you still want? You're looking at me. Go ahead and say your good morning. He will appreciate it.
Okay, so I'll say good morning to President Joseph Rennie. That's it.
Have a good day, Rhoda. Bye-bye.
You too. Bye.